My name is Amara Hassan, and I learned at the age of 29 that in America, your name can be a weapon used against you before you even walk into a room. For most of my life, I thought racism was the only barrier I'd have to navigate as a black woman in tech. I was wrong. When I converted to Islam at 25 and started wearing hijab, I discovered that religious discrimination could multiply the challenges I already faced, creating a perfect storm of prejudice that nearly destroyed my career and my faith in the American dream. I grew up Amara Johnson in Detroit, raised by my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. Grandma Ruby was a devout Baptist who filled our small house with gospel music, Sunday dinners, and an unshakable belief that education was the path to freedom. "You're gonna be somebody, baby girl," she'd tell me while helping with my homework at our kitchen table. "Don't let nobody tell you different." I excelled in school, especially in mathematics and computer science, earning a full scholarship to the University of Michigan where I studied software engineering. College was where I first encountered serious racism in academic settings. Professors who seemed surprised when I asked sophisticated questions, study groups that somehow forgot to include me, and career fairs where recruiters' enthusiasm visibly dimmed when they realized the impressive resume belonged to a black woman. But I persevered, graduating summa cum laude and landing a position at TechFlow Solutions in Chicago, a mid-sized company developing financial software for banks and credit unions. My early years in tech were challenging but manageable. I faced the usual microaggressions, colleagues expressing surprise at my technical knowledge, assumptions that I was there to fill diversity quotas, and the exhausting burden of being the only black woman on most teams. But I was good at my job, really good, and my code spoke for itself. I received excellent performance reviews, led successful projects, and slowly built a reputation as a reliable, innovative developer. The transformation in my life began during a particularly difficult period when I was 24. I'd been working 80-hour weeks on a major project, my relationship with my longtime boyfriend had ended badly, and I felt spiritually empty despite my professional success. A coworker, Yasmin, was a practicing Muslim who radiated a peace and centeredness that I envied. When I asked her about her faith, she invited me to attend a lecture at the Islamic Center of Chicago. I went out of curiosity and found myself deeply moved by the message of social justice, personal responsibility, and spiritual surrender that Islam represented. The Imam spoke about the faith's emphasis on education, charity, and equality before God, values that resonated with everything my grandmother had taught me. Over the next year, I studied Islamic theology, attended discussion groups, and slowly felt myself drawn to this path. When I finally took my Shahada, my declaration of faith, it felt like coming home to myself. The decision to wear hijab came gradually. At first, I only covered at the mosque and during prayers. But as my understanding of the faith deepened, I felt called to make this visible expression of my beliefs a full-time commitment. I spent weeks researching different styles, colors, and fabrics, excited about adding this new dimension to my identity. I chose beautiful scarves that complemented my professional wardrobe, thinking naively that my hijab would simply be another aspect of my personal style, like my choice of jewelry or hairstyle. The first day I wore hijab to work at TechFlow, I felt confident and spiritually centered. I'd prepared responses to questions I expected from curious colleagues, ready to educate and share my journey. What I didn't expect was the sudden chill in the office atmosphere. Conversations stopped when I walked into rooms. My project manager, Dave, who had always been friendly and collaborative, started speaking to me with a formality that felt like a wall. During our weekly team meeting, when I suggested a more efficient algorithm for our data processing module, Dave barely acknowledged my input before moving on to the next agenda item. The subtle changes escalated over the following weeks. I noticed that I was being excluded from informal planning sessions where important decisions were made. My direct reports started questioning my technical decisions in ways they never had before. When I mentioned these concerns to Dave, he assured me that I was imagining things, and that my recent lifestyle changes might be making me overly sensitive. The phrase lifestyle changes hit me like a slap, as if my religious faith was equivalent to choosing a new diet or workout routine. The breaking point came during a client presentation 3 months after I started wearing hijab. TechFlow was pitching a new security system to First National Bank, and I had developed the core encryption algorithms that made our proposal competitive. I had presented to clients dozens of times before, always receiving positive feedback on my technical expertise and communication skills. This time felt different from the moment I walked into the conference room. The client, a middle-aged white man named Mr. Patterson, visibly recoiled when Dave introduced me as the lead developer on the project. His eyes fixed on my hijab with an expression I'd learned to recognize. A mixture of suspicion, fear, and disgust. As I began explaining our security architecture, Patterson interrupted repeatedly with questions that had nothing to do with the technical content. "Are you sure this system is completely secure?" he asked, his emphasis on completely making his implications clear. "We can't have any vulnerabilities in our financial data." The presentation that should have showcased my expertise became an interrogation about my loyalties and intentions. Patterson asked pointed questions about my background, my associations, and whether I had any conflicts of interest that might compromise the project. Dave, rather than defending my professionalism, seemed to encourage these inquiries, nodding thoughtfully as if they were legitimate concerns. The meeting ended without a contract, and Patterson made a point of requesting that any future communications go through Dave directly. Back at the office, Dave called me into his office for what he termed a performance discussion. He explained that client relationships were crucial to our success and that my presentation style might not be the best fit for certain accounts. "It's nothing personal," he said, avoiding eye contact, "but some clients have specific comfort levels, and we need to be sensitive to their preferences." When I pointed out that my technical presentations had always been well received before, he suggested that my recent changes in appearance might be affecting client perceptions in ways that were beyond our control. The situation deteriorated rapidly after my HR complaint. I was removed from client-facing projects and assigned to internal maintenance tasks that were below my skill level and seniority. My access to certain systems was restricted without explanation. Colleagues who had been friends became distant and formal. During a team lunch, I overheard two co-workers discussing whether they should be worried about working with me, wondering aloud if my religious beliefs might make me sympathetic to terrorists. The final blow came 6 months after I started wearing hijab. Dave called me into his office on a Friday afternoon and handed me an envelope containing termination papers. The official reason was restructuring due to budget constraints, but I was the only developer let go despite the company posting job openings for my exact position the following week. The severance package came with a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from discussing the circumstances of my departure. I refused to sign it. The unemployment period that followed was devastating both financially and emotionally. I applied to dozens of companies, sending out resumes and portfolios that showcased 5 years of excellent work at TechFlow. But something had changed in the response rate. Before wearing hijab, my resume as Amara Hassan had generated interview requests from about 30% of applications. Now, as Amara Hassan with a LinkedIn profile photo showing my hijab, the response rate dropped to less than 5%. The few interviews I did secure were exercises in barely concealed discrimination. Hiring managers would express enthusiasm about my technical skills over the phone, but their demeanor would shift dramatically when they met me in person. One interviewer actually asked if I would be comfortable working with male colleagues, and whether my religious obligations would interfere with project deadlines. Another wanted to know if I had any extremist associations, and whether I could work on projects involving financial institutions that might conflict with Islamic banking principles. The psychological toll was enormous. I found myself questioning whether wearing hijab was worth the professional suicide it seemed to represent. I had passionate discussions with Yasmin about whether I could practice Islam privately without the visible marker that seemed to trigger so much hostility. "Your hijab is between you and Allah," she reminded me. "But don't let them force you to hide who you are out of fear." The internal conflict was agonizing. Staying true to my religious convictions while watching my career evaporate felt like an impossible choice. The discrimination extended far beyond the workplace. Airport security became a nightmare of random additional screenings, invasive searches, and pointed questions about my travel purposes. TSA agents would examine my laptop and phone with extra scrutiny, as if my hijab automatically made me a security threat. I started arriving at airports 3 hours early to account for the inevitable delays and harassment. During one particularly humiliating incident at O'Hare, I was detained for 2 hours while agents searched my luggage and questioned me about a work conference I was attending. They seemed suspicious that a Muslim woman would be speaking at a cybersecurity conference, as if my religious identity negated my professional expertise. Shopping while wearing hijab brought its own challenges. Store security followed me with obvious suspicion, sales associates offered minimal assistance, and other customers sometimes made loud comments about terrorists or towelheads within earshot. I learned to steel myself before entering certain stores and to have my credit cards and ID ready to prove I belonged in spaces where my presence was questioned. The breakthrough in my situation came through an unexpected source. Dr. Layla Ahmed, a successful Muslim entrepreneur who had founded several tech startups, reached out to me after hearing about my case through the Muslim Professional Network. She had faced similar discrimination early in her career and had started a consulting firm that specifically recruited talented Muslim professionals for companies committed to genuine diversity and inclusion. The tech industry is waking up to the fact that Islamophobia is costing them talent, Dr. Ahmed explained during our first meeting at her sleek downtown office. Companies are starting to realize that their unconscious biases are creating liability and limiting their access to skilled workers. My firm helps them understand that Muslim professionals aren't security risks. We're competitive advantages. She offered me a contract position with one of her clients, a fintech startup called InnovatePay that was actively seeking diverse perspectives to help them expand into global markets. The contrast between InnovatePay and TechFlow was striking from day one. During my interview, the founder, Sarah Kim, asked thoughtful questions about my technical experience and my insights into developing inclusive financial products. When she learned about my background in Islamic finance principles through my personal studies, she was genuinely interested in how those concepts might inform their product development. "We're building financial tools for a global audience," she said. "Your perspective on ethical finance and cross-cultural communication could be invaluable to our mission." Working at InnovatePay restored my confidence and reminded me why I loved software development. The team valued my technical contributions and actively sought my input on projects. When we were developing a payment app for immigrant communities, my experiences navigating discrimination as a Muslim woman provided crucial insights into the security and privacy concerns our users faced. My hijab wasn't seen as a liability. It was recognized as a symbol of my connection to communities that mainstream tech often overlooked. The success at InnovatePay led to speaking opportunities at tech conferences about diversity, inclusion, and the business case for religious tolerance in the workplace. I started sharing my story publicly, not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a professional advocating for systemic change. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of Muslim women in tech reached out to share similar experiences and to ask for advice on navigating discrimination. This outreach led me to co-found the Muslim Women in Tech Alliance with Dr. Ahmed and several other professionals. Our organization provides mentorship, networking opportunities, and legal resources for Muslim women facing workplace discrimination. We also work with companies to develop inclusive hiring practices and bias training programs. Last year, we successfully advocated for policy changes at 3 major tech companies that had been systematically excluding Muslim candidates from their hiring processes. My legal case against TechFlow took 3 years to resolve, but it ultimately resulted in a significant settlement and policy changes at the company. More importantly, it established legal precedent that religious discrimination in tech could not be disguised as client preferences or cultural fit concerns. The EEOC used my case as an example in their updated guidance on religious discrimination in the workplace. The personal growth that came from fighting this discrimination was unexpected. I developed a deeper understanding of intersectionality, how my identity as a Black Muslim woman created unique challenges that couldn't be addressed by focusing on racism or Islamophobia separately. I learned to build alliances across different marginalized communities, working with Black professional organizations, women in tech groups, and interfaith coalitions to address systemic discrimination. My relationship with my faith also evolved through this trial. The discrimination I faced for wearing hijab initially made me question whether the visible expression of my beliefs was worth the professional cost. But ultimately, the experience strengthened my conviction that religious freedom means nothing if it can only be exercised in private. My hijab became a symbol of resistance against the forces that wanted to erase my identity from professional spaces. The transformation of my career trajectory has been remarkable. 3 years after being fired from TechFlow, I'm now the Chief Technology Officer at InnovatePay, leading a team of 15 developers on cutting-edge financial technology projects. We've secured major contracts with international banks and payment processors who specifically value our diverse perspectives and inclusive approach to product development. My hijab, once seen as a barrier to client relationships, is now part of my professional brand as a leader who brings authentic diversity to the tech industry. I've also become a sought-after speaker and consultant on diversity in technology. Companies that once would have discriminated against me now pay substantial fees for my expertise on building inclusive workplaces and developing products for diverse global markets. The irony isn't lost on me that my experiences with discrimination have become a valuable professional asset, but I'm grateful for the platform it's given me to create change for others. The mentorship work remains the most fulfilling aspect of my current role. Every month, I meet with young Muslim women who are considering careers in tech but are afraid of the discrimination they might face. I tell them honestly about the challenges. The bias is real, the barriers are significant, and the emotional toll can be devastating. But I also show them that success is possible, that their identity can be a source of strength rather than shame, and that the tech industry desperately needs their perspectives and talents. One of my ments, Fatima, recently graduated from MIT with a computer science degree and was struggling with whether to wear hijab during her job search. "I'm afraid it will hurt my chances," she confided during one of our video calls. I shared my story with her, both the painful parts and the triumphant ones, and reminded her that authentic success requires being true to yourself. She decided to wear hijab during interviews and landed a position at a major tech company that valued her skills and respected her identity. "You showed me that I don't have to choose between my faith and my career," she told me. "I can have both." The legislative and policy changes that have emerged from cases like mine give me hope for future generations of Muslim professionals. Several states have strengthened their religious discrimination laws. The EEOC has issued clearer guidance on religious accommodation in the workplace, and many companies have implemented bias training programs that specifically address Islamophobia. The change is slow, but it's measurable. Key resources and solutions that made the difference. The Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, provides legal assistance and advocacy for Muslims facing workplace discrimination. Their Civil Rights Department handles hundreds of employment discrimination cases annually and offers free consultations. The Muslim professional networks in major cities offer mentorship, job placement assistance, and networking opportunities specifically for Muslim professionals in various industries. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has strengthened its guidance on religious discrimination and actively investigates complaints involving religious bias in hiring and workplace treatment. Professional organizations like the Muslim Women in Tech Alliance provide industry-specific support, including resume review services, interview preparation, and connections to inclusive employers. Legal aid organizations often take religious discrimination cases on a pro bono basis, especially when they have the potential to establish important precedents or create systemic change. Inclusive recruiting firms like those founded by Dr. Ahmed specifically help Muslim professionals connect with employers who value diversity and are committed to creating welcoming workplace cultures. The workplace bias training programs being implemented by forward-thinking companies create opportunities for Muslim professionals to educate colleagues and leadership about religious accommodation and inclusion. Today, when young Muslim women ask me whether they should hide their identity to avoid discrimination, I tell them that hiding won't protect them from bias. It will just make them invisible when opportunities arise. The discrimination is real, but so is the power of authentic representation. Your hijab isn't just a piece of fabric. It's a declaration that Muslim women belong in every profession, every boardroom, and every space where decisions are made that affect our communities. The path isn't easy, but it's necessary, and you don't have to walk it alone.